So Ireland against England, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear from an England perspective once again. A lot to get into for Steve Borthwick's side, but not a huge amount to feel positive about. In fact, nothing really to feel positive about at all. But that's what I'm talking about in this video. I was in Cardiff yesterday. I was travelling back whilst the Ireland-England game was happening, so I didn't see any of it. So I've just watched the full game. So this is going to be my thoughts on it. I'll talk about the number 8 position and what England should do now, given that Billy Vunipola looks like he is going to get a ban. And some other big questions as well for them. What really have we learnt about this England team over the course of these World Cup warm-ups so far? Unfortunately, it's nothing particularly good, but that's what I'm talking about in this video. Drop a comment down below, give me your thoughts. Like the video, subscribe to the channel as well. But let's get into it. So I kind of knew what I was getting myself in for from this. I'd seen a lot of the reaction to the game, another underwhelming performance from England. When is it going to click? So I kind of knew the big talking points, the Vunipola red card, and generally that they haven't played well. And once again, their attack hadn't functioned particularly well at all. And I think that's the big takeaway, the big frustration, or certainly from my point of view, the biggest frustration for England at the moment, is just the fact I'm thinking, where is this team going? Since Steve Borthwick came in, how have they developed? What are they trying to do? And we could kind of accept it in the Six Nations because he didn't have his coaching staff in place yet. He'd had very little time to work with the players. He had to come in, so on and so forth. But they've had months in training camp now with the coaching staff that he wants. And what are England really trying to do? How are they trying to attack? What do they want to do? And there's just very little, in fact, there's probably nothing at the moment for fans to grab hold of and say, that's what an England team is going to look like. That's going to be the identity of this team building forward, and it's something to build upon where eventually they can start winning games and maybe troubling the best teams in the world again. At the moment, you just don't see where that is coming from. And there's probably two examples that I picked out from watching the game, and they're fairly innocuous moments that you wouldn't necessarily remember if you were watching it, but I just jotted them down because I thought it was interesting. But they kind of highlight the point that England are struggling to really go through the phases in attack and struggling to function or look like that much of a cohesive unit at the moment. One was on 22 minutes where England had the ball in the midfield in their own half. Ben Youngs looked up, had Ellis Genge as the first receiver, and Genge didn't really, I think, want the ball particularly. It didn't really look like the move was on their whole shape, or their attacking game didn't really have any shape. Youngs passed it to Genge, he was a one-up runner. Ireland counter-rucked, turned the ball over. They actually conceded a penalty on that occasion, but it was still quite a good example that England at this moment in time, you just watched it and think, what are you trying to do? Nothing about this looks right. One-up runners, no pace, no continuity, no threat in attack. And another example, actually, I think of part of the reason why England are going wrong at the moment was on 31 minutes. And this was a first phase carry again by Ellis Genge off the top of the line out. England won the line out. They passed it into the midfield. Genge crashed it up and actually made good ground. It was one of the few times where you thought, okay, here's an attacking platform for England. I think they just got themselves into Ireland territory or kind of around that halfway mark, midfield part of the game. So Genge makes ground and immediately they chuck it back to Ford in the pocket who kicks long. And it looked like such a pre-planned, premeditated move that's kind of the problem with England at the moment. Everything seems so scripted. They are trying to play to this game plan that is almost so one-dimensional that when they do then make ground, it's almost like they're not able to attack space. And I think you look at the best teams in the world at the moment, you look at how Ireland attack, you look at how Scotland attack, or the All Blacks or France, they look to attack space. They play what's in front of them more than England do. And England you look at the moment, and it seems like they are being told to play a certain way, and it just is not working, which kind of brings up two questions really. Number one, is it going to work? Is it ever going to work? The jury's still out on that one. I would imagine a lot of you in the comments will be saying, well, no, it's not. But actually, almost the bigger thing for me is, even if it does start working, at what expense? Would people be willing to accept that kind of game plan if it was able to get results and get wins? Or would people still demand something more expansive and more entertaining? It's that old age adage, isn't it, in sport of... old age adage in sport of, do you want to see a winning team if it's ugly, or do you want to see your team be entertaining as well? Ideally, you have both of those things, which I think the best teams in the world at the moment do. But if England were able to get that game plan working, even if it's a bit ugly, even if it's a lot of kicking and getting rid of the ball and playing the percentages, but they do win games, would you accept that as an England fan? I think probably a lot of people at the moment probably wouldn't. They would still be pretty underwhelmed at the moment if that was to happen. So those are kind of general thoughts for England at the moment, and England no doubt will try and use it as full. There's a huge amount of negativity around the team at the moment. I think understandably so. What have the fans really got to get excited about? They've been sick with Eddie Jones over the last 4 years of being told we'll be okay, we'll be all right once we get to the World Cup. There's absolutely no evidence in front of them to suggest that is going to be the case. The other thing, though, here, once again, is if we do want to, and, I appreciate this is scratching the bottom of the barrel a little bit, but look for some sort of positives. Danny Kerr added more zip to it. The issue with Ben Youngs' slow play continues from an England perspective. It's been that way for the last few years. That continues to be a problem. Danny Kerr added a little bit of zip. Theo Dan actually looked pretty good with ball in hand when he came on. We know that is what he brings to the game. Very exciting player with ball in hand. And Marcus Smith as well. They brought him on as a fullback, but again, he was able to exploit space, and England did look like they were attacking the space more in those moments. And that brings us back to the point which has been pretty well trodden path now. England in recent times have looked more threatening than when they've had to chase games. England look more threatening when they have to chase a game. And that's a problem, and it speaks to what I was mentioning before, that really scripted game plan isn't working for them. When they have to chase a game, like against the All Blacks when they came back to draw, like against Wales last week when they were down to 12 and were able to get a victory, and even against Ireland here. I know Ireland scored a late try through Keith Earls as well, but England looked more threatening with ball in hand once they had to chase a game, and that tells me a lot that scripted, premeditated game plan isn't working at the moment for England. And I've mentioned the attack already. The red zone efficiency is absolutely atrocious. It was another game where multiple trips into the red zone, they only came away with the one try. I think amongst Tier 1 nations, England have got to be, or certainly one of the worst in terms of red zone efficiency teams in the world at the moment. You're not going to be able to do much at a World Cup if that is the case. Let's get on to the other two big things I wanted to talk about, though. The number 8 position, Billy Vunipola, a red card that was a red card. He deserves to get a ban. Given what we saw with Owen Farrell this week, who knows whether they will be able to get any mitigation in that, because the ball carrier was lower. I actually felt there was a little bit more of a wrap than some of the replays suggested. There was one angle that to me suggested he was trying to wrap with his left arm, which I think they could argue. The behind angle looked like a complete just shoulder to the head, no wrap at all. With the left arm, I think they might be able to argue that he was wrapping there. But let's presume Billy Vunipola is out. He's the only specialist 8 in the squad. I think there's a good chance that either Earl or Ludlam would play number 8. But is it time for Zach Mercer? And everyone in the comments, I'm sure, will be saying, Zach Mercer needs to be brought in. Bring in Zach Mercer. But here's the issue, right? If they do bring Zach Mercer in, what's going to happen? Because are England even playing a style of rugby at the moment that is going to get anywhere near the best out of Zach Mercer? I think they're probably not. I think they'll probably bring him in, and I think he'll probably be relatively disappointing in the way that a lot of those England players are disappointing at the moment, even though for their clubs, we see them do some really, really great stuff. So I wouldn't be opposed at all to them bringing Mercer in. I wouldn't be surprised if we actually see maybe a Ludlam at 8 or something like that. But let me know in the comments. I'm sure many of you will want to see Zach Mercer, because most people wanted to see him in the team in the first place. Final point in the video, and this is a big question for me. If you think about these World Cup warm-up games, and all right, England have got one more. They play Fiji at Twickenham next weekend. And by the way, that is far from a guarantee as a result at the moment. Can you imagine if England end up losing that game as well? The Fijians very, very dangerous. But you look at all these World Cup warm-up games, and you would have thought for the most part, England wanted to work out some of the 50-50 positions. So if I asked you, for example, what we've seen so far, who's going to partner Maratoja in the second row? I would say most people don't know. You could say Chesham, you could say Ribbons, some people might want to see George Martin. If I asked you what's the makeup of the back row going to be, in terms of the flanks, but obviously now number 8 as well with Vunipola possibly banned, I think you'd get a whole host of different answers of who people want to see there. What's going to happen in the centre as well? Is it going to be Ollie Lawrence? Is it going to be Lawrence with Marchant? Again, I think a lot of people don't know. And who's going to be the starting wingers? Again, I think a lot of people do not know. And I think that's kind of a reflection of where England are at the moment. I don't think they found out nearly as much as they would have wanted to from these World Cup warm-up games in terms of positions, in terms of what their best team is. At the moment, it's kind of anyone's guess. You could throw it up and see how it lands, and that could end up being the team, or it might not. I think there are still so many question marks for England. And England fans, how are we feeling? I must admit, I'm looking at it at the moment, and I'm really excited for the World Cup to watch Ireland, South Africa, and Scotland, South Africa, and the All Blacks against France in that opening game. I can't wait for the World Cup for some of those games. As for England, that's kind of my view. I'm not excited in particular. I don't think they'll do that much. The problem is they could still end up getting to a semi-final because of the side of the draw they're on, which would just paint over the cracks massively. But anyway, that's my general thoughts on the Ireland game. I appreciate I haven't mentioned the Irish here. I thought, from their point of view, I didn't even think Ireland played that well. I think they had some great moments, but it was kind of a nice pre-season friendly hit out for them. Their attacking shape looked good at times. They managed to rotate their squad a little bit. They waved goodbye to their home fans before they head out to France, etc., etc. They will have sterner tests, but they're a good team. I don't think we learnt a huge amount about them. So let me know your views in the comments down below. This England team, yeah, I don't know at the moment. Awful lot of negativity, and I don't think that is anything that we can do about it. And I'm sure, the old Eddie Jones that we saw last week, for those of you that saw that press conference, you're so negative about the game to all the journalists. I mean, when we look at England at the moment, what is there for the fans to be positive about? I'm not too sure. But drop a comment down below. Let me know. Like the video and subscribe to the channel as well. Would always massively appreciate it if you can do that. And I'll see you in the next one.